Hey awesome people, we're going to look at this today. This is the Vatican. What is the Vatican? What does it mean? We're going to cover that in this video. Where the heck does this thing come from? And what is it? Now, it seems to be a processional that is actually facing due east. So it's oriented. It's kind of very interesting. This is the Vatican. What does Vatican mean? We'll get to that as well. We're going to see basically what this comes from, and we're going to say that this is actually an attempt to reproduce something from thousands of years earlier. It's an homage to many of the buildings that were here in the past. This is not central Rome. It's a part of Rome that was swampland in Roman times. The Romans didn't really use it. You see it's next to a river. It's a holy place. And it was a swamp. It was a hill. As we go up from the river, we're actually climbing a hill. And this here, the Basilica of the Popes, St. Peter's, is actually on top of Vatican Hill. So this was a sacred hill next to the water. And it was a swamp. The classical Romans drained it. Marshall wrote that the wine grown here afterwards didn't taste very good. And this was always an eerie, spooky area. And the Romans themselves, they didn't really build too much in this area. It was a bit of bushland. There's still trees and parkland. It was a cemetery. This was a cemetery hill. And if you look up etymologies and things about the Vatican, you'll see all sorts of things. If you look up what Vatican means, it's not Latin. It's really not Latin unless you use the word vates, which is basically, you could almost put it into English, what is, because this was for auguries, this was for divination, and some people say it means divination hill. Vaticanus, that means divination hill in Latin, vaguely. So there were priests here in ancient times, but it really was a cemetery. But this here, what was it? This was the circus. And this is what it was. So this is the same view, the same direction as that. Very interesting. But here, what we have is, and this is what used to be the Vatican. As you see, we're looking upwards towards the river. There's the river. And we can see here the Molus Hadrian's mole. This was Hadrian's, basically a round pyramid dedicated to Hadrian, his mausoleum. And we can see it there. Right? So that is Hadrian's mole. It was converted into a fortress in 401. 410, Rome's sacked by the Germans. So obviously it wasn't that good of a fortress. And if you look here, this is drawn in the 1600s, showing what Rome used to look like. Vaticanus Hill on this end of a circuit, a pyramid, which is not here anymore. This pyramid and a couple round temples which kind of resemble in form this weird structure. Now this structure is Stonehenge-like. I've said it's Stonehenge-like in the past, but it really is not an attempt to make anything like Stonehenge, but it seems to be an homage to the circular temples that were here in the past. This temple is still here, but it now looks different. And as you see, this was Rome's Giza, because here we have a cluster of one pyramid for Hadrian, and there was one pyramid here, and a couple temples, and they're all in the one place. We see orientation because we see this hippodrome of Hadrian over here, where the St. Peter's is today, and that processional is today. Circus Kai and Neronis Caesaris, the circus of the Caesars, Caius and Nero. He's called Kai. That guy over there, that rake, that lad. Perhaps this word guy comes from Caius, or it was around before him, and that's where the word guy comes from. Now, if you look around at what was here, this pyramid actually says Monumentum Semper Romulus. This was the pyramid of Romulus. So there were two pyramids in Rome, one for Romulus, one for Remus. And these pyramids seem to be pre-Roman. They were built by the Giza people in Rome before the Romans even got there. And these were built by the founders of Rome, it would seem, because we've actually shown in previous videos that they're very Eastern in origin. They point to the lucky day of the year, Fortuna. They have star shafts like the Giza pyramids. It's so fascinating. This alignment here, this circus, seems to be east-west facing. Here it says, Qui il Palazzo di San Pietro. This is now the Palazzo St. Peter, and they thought the Palazzo St. Peter was up here. It's today up here. This one's just underneath it, a little bit further south. This is the alignment we're looking at, the Vatican. It goes through this pyramid that's no longer there, and it leads up to this pyramid of St. Peter. So we have an east-west orientation. In this case, the pyramid is in the east rather than the west, or it's an obelisk-like thing, and the obelisk is on the other side. The obelisk from Egypt, brought by Caligula, was in the west. And this is very interesting. Now, obelisks set up in the center of a sort of, this you could call it based on ancient Trojan funerary games. The Romans thought they were from the east, or they thought one of their ethnic components was Troy, and this Trojan component conquered the people who were here. And in ancient times, apparently Caligula set up his obelisk right in the middle. He brought this from Alexandria. It was moved from a previous temple in Egypt further south. They thought in the Middle Ages that in this ball on top, this capstone, there was the ashes of Julius Caesar. When it was opened in the 1600s, they said, oh, hang on a sec, there's dust in here. Other people say it was never open, it's solid, and that's no longer on there. But that obelisk there is that obelisk there. And that ball is it's gone. It's something different now. There's a monstrance on there, and maybe a holy relic in there. Now, if we look at this, we could see this could be set up for solar ritual. There's alignments. These could be these are solstice-like. We can look at this in another video, but that's actually not very important because this is kind of new, and this wasn't here before. If you look at what was here before, it was all very different. And this was a cemetery. There were tombs here. It was a wooded area. There's someone's villa over here. There's another mountain here. This looks like an underground tomb, Funiani. And if you look at the structure of this is a horse racing circus. You see that there's a triplicity here and a triplicity there, and then there's also 1, 2, 3. It's a triple like Giza. This was based on some kind of funerary games, or this was part of the evolution of the Hebset festival in Egypt, where the king had to run a circuit to prove his worth every year in Egypt. And he basically only ever symbolically ran this, but there was a tradition that the king had to prove himself in a games. And one wonders if this ancient tradition reached, this is the Roman version of that tradition where we have people like Commodus fighting in the ring. Now, what happened in the circus? The circus, as we know, it's not horse racing today, but it's a spectacle, which is quite interesting. So, oh, and by the way, we see something funny happening here. The Corfuns in Japan, and they're pointing in at right angle directions. And we see something similar here. We see the Circus of Nero, and we see the Circus of Adrian. And they're pointing in different directions as if they were Corfuns. And this whole thing is very Corfun-like. It's key-like because you have the round thing here. And this actually flares outwards because it looks like solar rays coming from the east need to flare outwards and hit different alignments. Possibly this casting a shadow on different saints here, because you notice the saints are staggered which is quite interesting. They're not aligned properly. This shows that this could be for sunlight hitting them with this pole here. But who knows about that connection with the east? Now, it gets deeper. This is the Giza-like architecture. The Corfu in Sardinia. Basically what happens is sunlight goes into a circular well here, and then you have steps leading down. It's a symbolic pyramid because it's pyramid shaped, but it's on the ground. It's like making a pyramid that you go into rather than one that's on the surface. You could almost call this a pyramid in certain respects. We'll look at this in another video, the astronomy of it, and it's Giza-like. And it just goes on and on. So what happened at the circus? This is what happened at the circus. This is Nero's dirges. This one's done by a Polish painter. And basically the Romans are like, yes, Caesar, it's all very good. We'll try not to look at it. And Nero's saying, look at my great masterpiece. We're killing the Christians. For some reason we've killed it with the bull, which is interesting. The bull, the Minoan axes. There's a Minoan component as well to the Romans. The plumbing, the baths, the running water, it's quite interesting because there's a Turkish historian who called this fellow here called Mehmet Kurtkaya, who says the Etruscans are from Turkey. They're from the Turk civilization, southeast Turkey, northwest Iran, and he says they're from here, and one branch went to become the Minoans, one branch became the Romans. And there's someone who says, if you look up the etymologies, this is the one that I really like. It just makes sense to me. Vatican is an Etruscan Turkish word, same as Öteken, meaning sun god. And that's very interesting indeed, because that is what the Vatican kind of is. It's kind of an east-west facing, oriented solar temple, in a way. So they're trying to build, I think, they're trying to do archaeology, they're trying to build what was here before. There's the circularity of the previous monuments I showed you. That's so interesting. Now, Mr. Baval said, and by the way, what Nero did with the Christians, this happened where the Vatican is. It's so interesting. Now, Mr. Baval wrote a book with Hohenzollern, very eminent name there, a bit German World War I, isn't it? Bernini and the building of the Hermetic Temple of the Sun, the Vatican heresy, and here we have the sun on top, the ball on top, and the sun rising in the east. That's rising in the wrong place. It should be rising on the other side. This is they've got it back to front in the, but you know the publisher just makes this. It's an artwork, you know. But they're saying they built a sun temple. Now, that's not really true. I think they were just trying to. That is true, but they were trying to build what was before in the past. But what they built was not what was there, but kind of what was there. And this is what was there, 1587, before the basilica was built. This is St. Peter's. Now we're looking towards the west. That's Vatican Hill, right there. Temple of the Sun in ancient times. And there's the obelisk. As you see, it's not built yet. Those rounded wings are not here at all. They were never here. This was an architectural feature of the 1600s. And this bloke here, I'll have to check him out. He seems the Turkish version of Baron Blackett and Alan Wilson, who are two British historians saying ancient Britain's a lot more prominent in world history than they say, and they've put the British down, they've put the Welsh down, they said they were barbarians and they didn't do anything, and they actually had a very big empire. Look, this guy's latest book, English was Turkish. You know, it's interesting. I see so many English words in ancient Egyptian that I sometimes have to wonder, you know. And even Vatican, what is, watters. You say watters in Latin. What is, essentially. Is a Latin word, it's not Germanic. And this was for divination. So check this guy out. He's very interesting because he also says that it's time It's the end for the Orientalizing period story found in many mainstream history books. The founders of ancient Italy came from Turkey, Iran. Well, some of them. No, I wouldn't say all of them, but okay, some of them. Just like the founders of ancient Greece, they did not Orientalize. They were from the Orient. So what he's talking about is 8th century BC, suddenly in ancient Greece you have very Egyptian-looking and very Iranian-looking vases and things, and they think, oh, they must have been getting an influx of trade goods, so they started copying them. Yeah, that's a possibility. And his possibility is they actually came from there. They popped up in the 800s BC, and that's kind of the case. Like the Greek civilization, it didn't do anything for about 400 years, and it started flourishing in about the 8th century BC or 700s BC. And that's about the time Rome started, and you had those pyramids popping up in Rome, I think, because they seem to have always been there. The Romans said they were built by Romulus and Remus. So this is Nero's circus, where he killed the Christians as an interval between horse races and all this, and chariot races. And that's the former position of the obelisk, according to this fellow, one fellow that I've just found this picture online. That's St. Peter's, and that's the new position of the obelisk. So as you see, they've kind of rebuilt the circus in a way, haven't they? That's another illustration. So the Piazza di St. Petra, and here we have the obelisk. Here we have the older circus of Nero. That's another interpretation. Whether this end was on this side, this end was on this side, the curved end was on the other side. I've seen two interpretations. That, by the way, is exactly like the Stonehenge cursus. We see a curved end, and then we see it's been abbreviated, and there's a pyramid there, a tomb. And we've seen that in the previous video. This is also the Egyptian religion. There's a pyramid here, and there's a cursus of sorts, a processional facing the rising sun. They would walk according to the beautiful Festal Valley from this end to that end and reach the pyramid here. Was that based on some ancient tradition? It seems these are funerary games from the East, and that's the whole reason that you have weird-looking Roman cursuses like this. They're actually these would have been astronomically aligned in the past, just like the Corfurns are astronomically aligned for someone's funeral. These were based on funerary games. So this is why they thought the cursus at Stonehenge was a cursus for horse racing. That's so fascinating. And you know, we go on and we go on and on looking at the ancient history, and that's what it looks like. Finally, we're getting to it. It's totally east-west facing. So it's for the rising sun. I reckon they did some archaeology here, and they tried to rebuild what the archaeology was showing them. Because why the heck else would you build something that is clearly, obviously, a solar temple when you didn't really have... Actually, they did. They did have a solar temple here. I'll show you. I'll prove it to you. This is Jasna Góra in Poland. It's the same thing. When I said this was the Polish Vatican, I hadn't previously seen that. It really is. So you have this monastery. It's the holiest place in Poland. It's pyramid-like, northeast, southwest, square-oriented monastery. It's built on a mound which is square-shaped, like a pyramid. And you have this processional which goes for 1.2 miles. And it's like a Roman cursus because you have kind of a big thing in the middle, and you have a church on this end, a church on this end. You look at what a Roman cursus looks like, big thing in the middle, and something on each end, a triple goddess on each end. We previously said, remember, these were capstones. We looked at the Byzantine version, and we said they were possibly the pyramid capstones because we're looking at a Giza-like thing here, a triple goddess, an alignment. The classical Romans didn't really understand this when they built Hadrian's tomb here, because they didn't understand this older religion. And that's what it looks like. Now, this was literally a solar temple. This is one reconstruction of the cursus with nothing around it, Nero's cursus. And this is just so interesting. So if we look at all the things that's going on, we look at M, there was a solar temple right next to it, or in the middle of the track. The Temple of Apollo. So you had this ancient round Temple of Apollo, which would have become, I guess, they were trying to redo the Temple of Apollo right here. So this is the new version of the Temple of Apollo, right? So that's the old version, and as you see, it's like the Pantheon. It's not here anymore. They think there would have been a round slit in it. The sun comes in. It's like the Pantheon. Beautiful. And so C is a obelisco sopra Dema spina oggi la... I can't really read Italian, but there we go. There's the Pyramid of Romulus. They've plonked it right there, which we've seen earlier. P. Memoria era... errata? No. A Romulo oggi le Vascetta. So the Pyramid of Romulus. So from the foundation of Rome, this pyramid may have been here. So it's a holy place. This was a cemetery. That there are where St. Peter's today is. It's Vatican Hill. So this is Monte Vaticano, Palazzo Pontifico con Giardini. Giardini built gardens behind the Vatican. In another reconstruction, they put the Temple of Apollo in the middle of the track because they don't know precisely where this Cursus of Nero actually was. Here we go again. Cursus Neronis in Vaticano. Ubi hodie templum de Petri. That means, what is today the Temple of St. Peter's? So, as you see, they've sort of recreated this, and that's interesting. And it's quite interesting because the fact you put a kind of obelisk in the middle here, and you saw they did it with another track, and the Byzantines copy, they did the same thing. The Romans had no point moving towards the Byzantines, towards the east, founding a new Rome there, abandoning the old Rome. They said, we're going back home again, this is cool. And you see the triplicity, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It's like Giza, triple pyramid. There's 3 threes of a pyramid and a big one in the middle. Giza, you have a big pyramid in the middle. You see, these guys had the same damn religion. It's so fascinating as the Egyptians, the predecessors to the classical Romans. That's what it looks like today. Mausoleum of Adrian. It's possibly built on something. What was there before? No one knows. He built this strange round, massive circular pyramid for himself, which is actually northeast southwest facing. Let's have a little gander at that. This is what I find very interesting. If you see something that's northeast southwest facing and it's square, that is extremely suspicious as being an ancient pyramid because there's no reason to make a castle northeast southwest facing. He built this from an ancient, possibly very large tomb. So there were pyramids. There were massive pyramids in Italy before the Romans got there, such as the tomb of Porsenna. I hope you've enjoyed this video. There's been a lot here. It's been everywhere. Now, why would you face the equinox? Essentially, the Bible contains internal evidence that Yeshua of Nazareth was born in the fall of the year. It has been suggested that early Christians set Christmas at the appropriate time of the winter solstice to match existing pagan celebrations. This places Jesus' conception 9 months earlier, coinciding with the time of the spring equinox. So that's why we're facing the east. So it looks like the Romans, as we've seen, were building in the Roman version of Giza, and they were rebuilding a temple of Apollo that was there. And this is where it gets so cool. It was here, right next to this, just as the Vatican today is right next to where this used to be. So that is kind of the origin of the Vatican. They were trying to rebuild a temple of the sun of ancient times, which was right there. And the pyramid, it's Giza-like. It's on a plateau, St. Peter's, a holy hill. And in Turkish, it's the Temple of the Sun. That is the weird origin of the Vatican. Hope you enjoyed.